You know what? How about we watch the new episode of The Rise of China by Epic History? We had watched episode 1 and 2 before, which covers the last of the Qing dynasty, then the rise of, what was it, Sun Yat-sen, then Chiang Kai-shek, then the warlords, then Japan invade Manchuria, which becomes Manchukuo. There's also like the Communist Party almost getting destroyed, but doing the Long March and regrouping. Then one of Chiang Kai-shek's general basically ends up like kidnapping him and making him make a deal with the communists so that they ally and fight the Japanese out of Manchuria. And I think that's where we stopped. And I know this is going to get messed up. I mean, last time, the two videos we watched last time were already like it was already a lot of messed up stuff. But, from the little bit that I think we've all heard about like the Japanese occupation of, Southern China and the stuff they've done there, it's pure evil, right? I mean, basically like as bad as anything the Nazi did, if not worse at the time, but I guess not on the same scale. That's the biggest difference. So yeah, I don't know if I'm ready, but again, you guys know how much I like Epic History. I think one of the best channels on YouTube. So it's time to learn. And to be honest, I know a little bit about like this section of history. I've watched the whole World War I and World War II series by Time Ghost, Indian Idol, which covers the China theater of war. But I'm sure like there'll be a lot more details here, very different presentation. So let's watch it. The Rise of China, the Battle for Survival. This is the turning point for existence or obliteration. Chiang Kai-shek, 1937. War with Japan. Basically, like the unofficial start of World War II, right? I mean, people often say it's like the invasion of Poland in 39, but in a way, this kind of was the beginning.
China, 1937. Tensions have been rising on the border with Manchukuo, a puppet state run by an increasingly militaristic Japan. So far, China's nationalist leader, Chiang Kai-shek, has carefully avoided a major confrontation. His strategy has been to buy time, to eliminate his internal communist enemies first. But bowing to increasing anti-Japanese sentiment across China, he has concluded a truce with the communists.
He was kidnapped to make the truce.
On the 7th of July, at the Marco Polo Bridge outside Peking, there's an argument over a missing Japanese soldier, and shots are fired. Within days, Japanese reinforcements flood the area. This time, China is ready to push back. In a speech made 10 days after the Marco Polo Bridge incident, Chiang Kai-shek warns of the struggle ahead. Let our people fully understand the meaning of the limit of endurance and the scale of sacrifice implied. For once that stage is reached, we can only sacrifice and fight to the bitter end. The national mood is summed up by a popular song, March of the Volunteers.
A new Great Wall.
In
That's not motivating.
1978, March of the Volunteers will become China's official national anthem.
Is it to this day?
The fighting around Peking rapidly escalates into a full-scale invasion. Some historians consider this the moment World War II begins.
Yeah.
Chiang Kai-shek's national...
Which is the kind of thing that, again, before starting to watch history video on YouTube and getting interested in history videos, You know, I never really like had heard about or anything. Like, you know, you always hear about 1939 and obviously like this is where everything explodes. But you could say that this was like, you know, like the fuse being started and it's slowly burning until 39.
Revolutionary Army, the NRA, is in the unusual position of receiving support from both the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany.
Really?
But it's not enough to hold back the Japanese Imperial Army.
Okay.
With superior tactics, modern...
But isn't Japan allied with the Nazi at this point? So why is the Nazi helping China?
equipment and air superiority, they smash through Chinese defenses. Within 6 weeks, nearly 200,000 Japanese troops have occupied a broad swathe of northern China, including the old imperial capital, Peking. But it's in Shanghai that both sides will plunge into the abyss.
I'm not ready. It is our fixed policy to resist to the last inch and to the last man. Chiang Kai-shek. Battle of Shanghai, August to November 1937.
Shanghai is the largest city in China, and its commercial and cultural capital.
You can see Nanking.
The heart of the city is the international settlement,
Not close allies,
by Western
I see.
imperial powers in the 19th century, and jointly run by 14 countries, including Japan. The Japanese have recently overtaken the British as the largest foreign presence in Shanghai, with 30,000 civilians, as well as 8,000 Marines and 32 naval vessels. Chiang Kai-shek sees an opportunity to divert the Japanese from their northern offensive, while also bringing the war to international attention.
I see.
On the 13th of August, he orders Chinese forces to attack Japanese ships moored in Shanghai. The Japanese send reinforcements. Shanghai and the surrounding region become a major battlefront.
Look at this footage.
Drawing in 1 million troops.
1 million.
The city is devastated in fierce urban fighting, with tanks on the streets, poison gas attacks, and air raids.
Poison gas.
The NRA suffers heavy losses, particularly to its elite German-trained divisions.
I still don't understand that. I wish he'd explain, like... I mean, sure, Japan and Germany not close allied by now, then they become closer ally in a sense when, you know, World War II actually starts. But even then, Germany training some of the Chinese divisions is kind of... I've never heard of that.
In late October, it begins to withdraw. A single battalion is left behind to hold the Sihang warehouse.
Was it important?
In desperate fighting, the Suicide Battalion holds out for 6 precious days.
Look at that.
Buying
Insane.
time for other units to escape.
Wow.
Their sacrifice and the horrors of the battle occur directly under the gaze of foreign observers based in Shanghai's international settlement, where they are shielded from the worst of the fighting.
Yeah, they didn't help because they were busy with China and, you know, the plan to attack the US, right? I don't think Germany was mad about that, right? I mean, maybe they would have loved the help with the Soviet, but, you know, Japan was, like, diverting the US and China, which was helping Germany in some way. Yeah.
Their images and reports quickly travel around the world and turn Western public opinion firmly against the Japanese. But what happens next will shock the world.
Alright. In all modern history, surely, there's no page that will stand so black as that of the rape of Nanking. George Fitch, American missionary. Here we go. It's the kind of thing that I've already seen a video about, but it's the kind of subject that I don't really like to hear about again. As you know, like knowing it once is enough, and after that, yeah, like I know about it, but it's so fucked up, you know. I'm not like super thrilled of hearing it again. The Nanking Massacre, December 1937 to January 1938.
Japanese forces pursue the retreating NRA to the new nationalist capital, Nanking. After a ferocious 4-day battle, they enter the city on the 13th of December. The few Westerners inside the city form an international safety zone to shelter themselves and some of the local population.
I think one of the videos I'd seen, there was a Nazi in that zone, which is one of the guys that would be called the good Nazi. Now, obviously, it's more complicated than that, but basically, he tried to save a lot of the Chinese population of the city, shielding them as much as he could from the Japanese. I forget his name top of my head, but it's a very interesting story. Very, very interesting.
But most Chinese civilians are left to the mercy of the Japanese. For 6 weeks, Japanese soldiers go on the rampage, looting, torturing, raping, and murdering. The numbers are disputed, but between 50,000 and 300,000 civilians are killed. Around 30,000 Chinese prisoners of war are shot in mass executions. Others are decapitated, or buried alive, or used for bayonet practice. Bodies are piled up in the streets, burned, and dumped in the Yangtze River.
And even worse things that I had read about, I think, on some Reddit post and all that, and I don't even want to like name them, right? But even worse things. I wonder if this is like one of the most brutal events in history. Like the Holocaust itself was absolutely insane, right? And there was a lot of like extreme torture and all that, but you know, was it on this level? I don't really know. I mean, they were both basically the worst event in history, the rape of Nanking and the Holocaust. But I'm thinking on like history up to this point, was there anything before? Like, I know the Mongols were very extreme. Like, they would also basically raze city to the ground, maybe in the exact same way. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but it's insane. I mean, you know, I understand it's always been like the story of humanity to conquer a nation, conquer places, you know, destroy the civilian population to an extent, but man, I just don't understand like the level of it, you know? I mean, if you're gonna kill someone, just shoot them in the end. But the stuff that it did at Nanking is just, again, just thinking about it makes me kind of sick. It's fucked up.
The International Safety Zone is managed by German businessman and Nazi supporter
That's the guy.
John Rabe.
That's the guy.
He is appalled by the violence and hopes Hitler will intervene to stop the Japanese.
Motherfucker, like, I guess he didn't know, but 2 years later, like, Hitler would start the Holocaust, so...
Instead, the fall of Nanking convinces the Nazis that Japan is the stronger partner. And Germany cuts off its military support to China.
I see. So I guess I was wrong, yeah, they weren't yet allied with Japan. I see.
The rape of Nanking appalls the world. It is condemned by the USA and League of Nations, the international body dedicated to maintaining world peace. But their words are not backed up by action. Atrocities become a feature of the Japanese war against China. The systematic use of rape as a weapon of war forced prostitution on a massive scale, and the use of chemical and biological weapons on civilians
Unit
and
731.
prisoners of war, which
That
killed
was in
many
Nanking.
thousands.
Yeah.
The Japanese army's next objective is Wuhan. There is a rare Chinese victory at the Battle of Taiyuan, but it is not enough to halt the Japanese. Chiang Kai-shek's government makes a desperate and fateful decision. The order is given to breach dikes holding back the Yellow River at Huayuankou. The hope is that the floods will stop the Japanese army in its tracks.
But China is so massive, like they can just go around somewhere else.
In early June, the floodwaters of the Yellow River surge south and east across the densely populated North China Plain.
You're murdering your own people.
There has been no advance warning to the villages and towns in its path. The consequences are catastrophic. Farmland and entire villages are submerged.
And
500,000 civilians perish. 5 million are made homeless.
so you basically like, I mean, it's a war of like, you know, like if they stopped the Japanese with this, maybe it would have been worth it, right? In a sense of like, by stopping them, all these deaths right here will be less than what would have happened if they conquered the rest of the country. You could say that, but at the same time, man, you just killed like this massive amount of your own people, and you're asking the rest to fight for the country when you just killed like, I mean, come on.
The loss
yeah,
of
Novik,
farmland
maybe.
will cause famine
Maybe.
and hardship for years to come. One of the greatest man-made disasters in history, committed by the Chinese government against its own people. The floods failed to stop the Japanese, who merely bypassed the affected areas.
Makes sense.
By the time Chinese and Japanese forces clash near Wuhan, there are nearly 2 million men engaged.
That much, huh?
The battle for the city is hard fought, with heavy losses on both sides. But once again, Japanese air power and tactics, alongside the widespread use of poison gas, prove decisive.
Didn't realize poison gas was used so much at this point.
The city falls after 4 months. The nationalist government retreats 500 miles further inland, to Chongqing, in the western province of Sichuan. The Japanese now occupy China's largest cities and install a new puppet government in Nanking.
With a Puyi, right?
But despite its victories, the Japanese army is too exhausted to land another major blow. The war enters a stalemate. Historians label this conflict the Second Sino-Japanese War. The Chinese call it the War of Resistance.
Makes sense, yeah.
But it is about to become a crucial front in a world war.
Yeah. It's time, I guess. As the rising sun melts thinly frozen ice, so the Japanese army is overcoming Chinese troops. General Shunro Kuata, 39. World War II, 39-45.
By 1939, China's only major foreign backer is the Soviet Union. It provides crucial supplies, and its pilots and aircraft make up most of the nationalist air force. The Soviets are fighting their own war against Japan, a
That's
widely
right.
forgotten conflict on Russia's far eastern frontier. But that summer, with war looming in Europe, Stalin makes a truce with Japan. It is signed on the 15th of September. 2 days later, Soviet troops invade Poland as allies of Nazi Germany.
Yep.
Despite losing its major foreign ally, China fights on against the Japanese occupation. Chongqing becomes a nationalist redoubt, pummeled by more than 200 Japanese air raids. While in northern China, communists carry out large-scale guerrilla attacks on the Japanese.
This one, they're used to doing that against
But all
the Chinese
cooperation
government.
between communists and nationalists has once more been broken off.
I was literally about to say, like, is the alliance between the two? I guess they don't have time to fight since they're fighting the Japanese, but of course they have time to fight.
The nationalists now receive foreign arms and supplies via French Indochina, today Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos. So in 1940, Japan occupies French Indochina to cut the link. But this fresh act of Japanese imperialism alarms the Western powers, whose Southeast Asian colonies are now within range of Japanese forces. The US, Britain and the Dutch impose an oil embargo on Japan, which threatens
the
to
biggest thing
cripple
they
its
could do.
economy and its war effort in China. The Western powers hope Japan will back down.
Which, again, not a terrible idea, but it kind of like had the opposite effect. Even though they might have done that anyway, but like now they literally had, they always were maybe thinking of like going to war with the US and conquering more territory. But now it's very like, it's the Japanese culture, like they didn't want to admit defeat, to accept the terrible turn. So like now they had literally no choice but to go conquer other places to get the oil and the natural resources that they've been cut off from.
But in Tokyo, the decision is taken to gamble on war.
Fucking Tojo.
In December 1941, the Japanese launch a surprise attack on the US naval base at Pearl Harbor.
If you've never seen it, I highly recommend. It's a very long documentary by Time Ghost. They made like a minute-by-minute documentary on Pearl Harbor. It's pretty amazing. It really like talks about everything, from the planning of it, the execution, kind of the different POV from the kamikaze plane, to the people on the ground, to the people in the ship, to the civilians. Minute by minute. It's very, very long. It's this one. I'll link it in the chat. It's quite a few hours, but it's super interesting. Here you go. Highly recommended. Probably the best documentary about it.
Hawaii. They simultaneously bomb US and British bases across Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
In a series of rapid, bold advances, the Japanese capture British colonies including Hong Kong and Singapore, the Philippines and the oil-rich Dutch East Indies. But Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor has woken a sleeping giant.
It was madness.
Within a year, US factories are turning out more vehicles, ships and aircraft than all the other combatant powers put together. China will be one beneficiary, receiving more than $1.5 billion worth of armaments as part of the US Lend-Lease program.
Yeah.
When the Japanese take Burma, supplies have to be flown into China from India, a perilous route over the Himalayas, known to US pilots as the Hump.
The Burma Road is, like in the game Unlisted, it's a free-to-play on Steam, a great World War II shooter. Like one of the best maps that they actually added like just last year was the Battle of the Burma Road. It's a really good map. Really great to play.
Chiang Kai-shek also receives a new chief military advisor.
I forgot about this guy.
Acerbic US General Vinegar Joe Stilwell.
He was, I don't know if he was terrible per se, but he was not the right guy for this. Again, I remember a bit from the Time Ghost series, but basically, he would constantly like fight with Chiang Kai-shek, and so things would not get done or would not get done right or would be too slow and stuff like that. So in the end, he was over there, but causing more trouble than helping the situation.
Stillwell regards Chiang as a stubborn, ignorant, prejudiced and conceited despot. The loathing
he's
is
not
mutual.
a great guy.
Chiang, like many,
Sure.
finds Stillwell's arrogant and overbearing manner hard to stomach. Further aid comes in the form of Major General Claire Chennault's famous Flying Tigers. This elite squadron of American volunteers has remarkable success against the Japanese Air Force.
Whoa. 299 killed to 12 lost.
As the war goes on,
That's the ratio.
more US air units arrive in China, leading to the construction of several US air bases. China is now one of the four major Allied powers, alongside the US, Britain and Soviet Union. In November 1943, Chiang travels to Cairo, Egypt, to attend a conference with British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and US President Franklin Roosevelt.
Ish.
Chinese resistance is tying down nearly 1 million Japanese soldiers, and they assure Chiang of increased support, though in reality, neither sees China as a priority.
Yeah.
Yet help is desperately needed.
Though at the same time, like, even if they saw China as a priority, like, what could have been done at that time? I mean, the fight, like, this is 43, the madness was in full swing in Europe, right? Where everything was being squeezed dry, right? Like, every resource was sent over there in the grind of it. Like, was there even, like, much more help that could have been sent?
What remains of the Chinese economy is collapsing, with rampant inflation, corruption, and a devastated industrial sector.
It's
The
insane.
nationalist government is struggling to pay its soldiers, who desert in growing numbers. Just as Japan is preparing to launch its largest operation of the war.
Oh boy. Frankly, in the last 3 videos we've seen, I mean, in just the last 3 decades of China, it's just like the amount of death, suffering, and all that. Like, is there even any government or anyone left, you know? In this war, China is losing all the battles, but China is on the winning side. Edgar Snow. Sure. Guess that's true. Operation Ichigo.
April 1944. Japan is on the back foot against the Allies in the Pacific. It hopes to salvage the situation with a massive offensive in China to link up northern China with Indochina and destroy US airfields in the south that are used to bomb Japan. The codename is Operation Ichigo. Weakened Chinese forces break under the onslaught. Several US air bases are taken, and the connection between North and South is established by October.
That's quite the wedge.
Once more, the Chinese military suffers enormous losses.
600,000 to 100,000. That's insane. I mean, there were similar numbers of like Germany versus the Soviet Union, right? where the Soviet would lose like many times more most of the time, but I don't know if it was this much of a discrepancy. That's insane. But China has the numbers.
Is another blow to Chiang's reputation.
And less numbers.
But when Stilwell demands that he be put in direct command of all Chinese forces, Chiang gets him replaced. Yet US faith in Chiang is fraying. Some contrast nationalist corruption and incompetence with the success of the Chinese communists, who continue to wage their guerrilla warfare campaign against the Japanese in the north. But the success of Operation Ichigo comes too late to save Japan.
I mean, it was never going to save them, right? Like, even if they conquered all of China, you know, once Germany and the European theater is finished, like, you know, the rest of the powers would come here to finish the job, and it would be done anyway.
In the spring of 1945, the last major Japanese offensive in China is defeated. And Chinese troops counterattack. US strategic bombing of Japan's home islands culminates in August 1945 with the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Simultaneously, the Soviet Union invades Manchuria.
Which I had seen some video like that basically was saying, you know, there's many reasons the atomic bomb happened, but, you know, and I don't need to get into all of them, right? But one of the one was also that the US was worried that, yeah, the Soviet were coming and they didn't want them taking over, you know, Japan, right? That was it.
Within a week, Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's unconditional surrender to the Allies. The Second World War is over.
Madness.
The death toll is staggering. Between 15 and 20 million Chinese lives are lost.
Insane.
Only the Soviet Union suffers more.
Yeah.
Then there is the multitude of wounded, the refugees, and the destitute. The country will have to undergo complete reconstruction. But who will lead it is still to be settled.
We know where it's going. And understandably so, yeah. Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. Mao Zedong, 38. Civil War, another one. Another one, like seriously. Like in industry videos so far, there's been like 3 or 4 Civil War. At least.
Japan's defeat leaves a vacuum in China, which both nationalists and communists rush to fill. From the Soviet Union, the communists receive Manchuria and captured Japanese weaponry, while the US and Britain fly nationalist forces into northern and eastern China.
From here on, I'm definitely blind again on what happens.
To prevent open conflict, Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong meet for US-sponsored talks in Chongqing. The agreement they reach is short-lived.
Like every time so far they made an agreement.
Chiang Kai-shek remarks to his aides, "The sky cannot have 2 suns."
That is a cool line, but come on.
In 1946, civil war erupts as Chiang launches an assault on the communist-held north, led by his elite US-trained divisions. The nationalists make advances, taking Shanyang and the Communists' wartime base in Yan'an. But the Communists weather the storm, avoiding major battles and sticking to their wartime guerrilla tactics. And in rural areas, their program of land reform attracts many thousands of peasants to their cause.
I mean, if I was a peasant at the time, I'm definitely joining their side, like 1000%. I mean, even if you haven't heard of everything, if you've heard just a little bit of what the national government has done, you know, in the recent time, you know, all the mess they caused, you know, at first not even trying to like rescue Manchukuo, right? Like leaving it to the Japanese until like they were forced basically to start like trying to free it, only to then start losing terribly, to then like kill a ton of their people by the flooding and all that. Like there isn't much hope that you would have in the national government compared to the communist side of things, which I'm sure has done a lot of bad stuff as well, but they still build a reputation of like, you know, helping the common people compared to the nationalist government who clearly doesn't care. Clearly.
In contrast, the nationalists have been burnishing their reputation for incompetent and corrupt government.
Well,
Chinese industry and trade have been devastated by war. But economic mismanagement adds to the misery, causing hyperinflation.
That's some
And
stacks.
despite heavy backing from the US in loans and military supplies, the nationalists are rapidly losing support in both cities and rural areas. In 1947, General Lin Biao reorganizes communist forces into the People's Liberation Army, nearly 1 million strong. Mao decides this is the moment to abandon guerrilla tactics and take on the nationalists in open warfare.
I guess they're their weakest.
In a string of successful counter-offensives, the communists capture territory, weapons and supplies, and conscript deserters and prisoners into their ranks. The tide of war is shifting dramatically. In September 1948, the People's Liberation Army launches 3 major offensives. In the first, Lin Biao sweeps the nationalists.
It's just like insane it never ends, right? I mean, like, you know, all the madness of the last few decades, then World War II, I mean, the biggest human conflict in history just happened. And literally like a year or two after that, they go back to civil war. And now we're like close to the Korean War, right? Which is, you know, close in terms of like proximity. I mean, it's just under there, right? Under Manchuria. It's just non-stop.
Out of Manchuria. The nationalists lose more than 400,000 men. Only 150,000 are able to escape south. The following month, 2 simultaneous campaigns lead to the capture of Tianjin and Suzhou.
YA campaign.
It is a disastrous winter for the nationalists, who suffer another 500,000 casualties and lose much of their best military equipment.
Well,
In just 4 months, the communists have won 3 major victories and driven their enemies from northern China. In the southern cities, there is chaos and lawlessness as nationalist rule breaks down. That spring, the communist advance continues. In April, they take Nanking, and the following month, China's largest city, Shanghai. On the 1st of October 1949, Mao Zedong, chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, stands before a packed Tiananmen Square in Peking and
Tiananmen
proclaims
Square.
the founding of the People's Republic of China.
49, okay.
That winter, the last nationalist-held areas
So the
fall
Korean War
to
is starting this
communist
year.
forces. It It's estimated more than 2 million soldiers were killed or wounded in the 4 years of China's civil war. Perhaps another 5 million civilians perish through fighting, famine, and disease.
Insane.
Chiang Kai-shek, alongside some 2 million nationalist troops and many refugees, retreats to Taiwan,
The start of the Taiwan situation.
one of the last territories still under nationalist control.
Right.
Chiang Kai-shek will never return to mainland China.
Yeah.
Where Mao Zedong and the Communist Party are triumphant.
I mean,
Now the work will begin to build
Total
a
victory.
new China from the wreckage of invasion and civil war. Do you want to watch unreleased new
The
epic
end.
history videos right now? Weeks before they drop on YouTube?
the Patreon, I'll pause here, but yeah, obviously, you know, if you can support their Patreon, obviously we'll stay, right? Okay, I mean, I hope they do more episode of all this, right? You know, I really don't have much knowledge of what happens after that, right? I mean, again, I knew some of the World War II stuff, but after that, up to now, I am, you know, very unknowledgeable about China, I guess, like totally. I really don't know much. I just know, you know, the communists, like, control the country. They brought the country out of like this madness. Obviously, you know, things were far from perfect, but for the most part, yeah, like the country, you know, started doing much better and all that. That's about it. Like the general idea of what's happening that I get. Amazing video, as always, by Epic History. I mean, as always, the narration, the visuals, the historical footage, the music, the quotes, the way they do it is just above and beyond everybody else, I feel like, as far as the story video. Yeah, really, really great stuff. You know, there was quite a few things I knew, but I still learned a lot, which is awesome, I would say. I learned a lot, yeah. Or today, that's one of the situations. Was it just after this? I was gonna say, like, I was thinking, you know, I was just talking about like how it seems just to never end, right? Like China for the last few decades at this point, after the fall of the Qing dynasty, it's just like nonstop, right? I mean, there's no time to breathe. They have like conflict after conflict after conflict. And I'm guessing that, you know, even though I don't know in my head the different conflicts, after this, they're gonna basically be involved in a bunch. I mean, one that I know literally, like, after this is the Korean War, right? I mean, it's not a fun. I don't know if most people realize, but you know, I've been watching the Korean War by Indy Nidell. I recommend the channel. It's going week by week on what happened in the Forgotten War. It's often called the Forgotten War, but you know, like this is starting in 49, I believe. And at first, you know, it's North Korea versus South Korea, with the US and the UN somewhat helping South Korea. But eventually, yeah, you know, the Soviets through the Chinese end up helping North Korea, right? And a massive, massive amount of Chinese, you know, army ends up fighting in the Korean War. I highly recommend this channel. So far, there's been like, what, 50 episodes, yeah, of the Korean War. Insanely interesting. Great channel. The spiritual leaders, Dalai Lama took refuge in India, and 1962, India-China war followed up. Fair enough. So yeah, again, like China just like this never-ending series of war over the last century, at least. It is kind of insane, like just non-stop. To me, like it's just unfathomable. Are they like? How you can just have a like non-stop war, like just never stopping like that, non-stop. Between yourself against other country, just like non-stop. Insane. All I can say. So yeah, great video, super interesting, awesome stuff. Hopefully they do more episode on stuff after that. I'm very interested.